What you just saw was not a natural disaster. It was induced by man and therefore can be called or categorized as a man-made disaster. The video that you saw a while ago is of one of the deadliest nuclear attacks in history. The video was of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that took place in 1945. As I mentioned, it was one of the deadliest of its kind during that time. The after effects of this bombing was felt for several generations. The after effects of nuclear disaster included keloid. Now, keloid is the excessive growth of scar tissue over a burnt area. So you can see here is the picture of a person suffering from keloid. Now, besides keloid, other after effects included leukemia, cancer, and other terrible side effects from the radiation for several generations. So for several generations, people had to suffer from the after effects of that nuclear disaster. The radiation that was spread in the nuclear bombings was present in the atmosphere and also in the consequent generations who had to suffer from all these diseases. So the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is a kind of man-made disaster. Man-made disaster, as you can very well understand, is not like the natural disaster. While natural disasters take place as a result of geological factors and climate factors, the man-made disasters are man-induced, and these can have several reasons. Now, have you heard of the Bhopal gas tragedy? Well, the Bhopal gas tragedy is another form or another example of a man-made disaster. Do you know what happened in this? Well, the Bhopal gas tragedy, more commonly known as the Bhopal disaster, was the leakage of a toxic chemical gas from a chemical plant. Now, this toxic chemical gas was methyl isocyanate. Methyl isocyanate. So on December 3rd, 1984, there was a leakage of 45 tons of this toxic chemical gas from the chemical plant. Now this gas spread rapidly around the densely populated regions that surrounded the plant by air currents. This took the lives of many thousand people, while a lot were in panic as they tried to flee from Bhopal. So, the Bhopal gas tragedy of 1984 is a man-made disaster that took away the lives of thousands of people. Now, people who managed to escape from the scene of disaster did suffer from other respiratory issues and also suffered from blindness and eye irritation. So for several consequent years, livestock were born deformed, and there were many other cancer-related diseases that were suffered by humans. While the Bhopal gas tragedy was regarded as one of the most deadliest industrial accidents of that time, the Chernobyl disaster is of a similar kind, and it is regarded as the deadliest of its kind in history of humanity. So the Chernobyl disaster of 1986, that is 2 years after the Bhopal gas tragedy, occurred due to radiation leakage from the Chernobyl nuclear power station. So the Chernobyl nuclear power station in Soviet Union was a blast of the nuclear power plant that led to the spread of large amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Now this was carried over millions and acres of land surrounding that particular place due to strong air currents. The radioactive materials reached Belarus, Ukraine, and also as far west as France and Italy. Millions of people were evacuated, thousands were killed, and some also had to remain in contaminated areas. People suffered from radioactive induced illness and also other cancer related diseases. So as I mentioned, such a nuclear disaster led to the spread of radioactive materials by wind, and this crossed millions of acres of forest and farmlands, contaminating them and also contaminating residential areas. So you see that people were affected not only by the radioactive material but also incurred huge economic loss due to the contamination of farmlands and forest areas. Now besides that, human negligence and poor work ethics could also lead to man-made disasters like rail, road and air accidents. So rail accidents or air accidents is a result of human negligence and poor work ethics. Poor wiring in residential areas or in any building may also lead to fire that can cause huge loss of life and property. So human negligence can become a very important factor in leading to any man-made disaster. Even the outbreak of epidemics. For example, the cholera outbreak that happened in Nigeria was due to the polluted drinking water. Now what does this tell us? This tells us about poor sanitation and waste management techniques. So this is clear negligence from the part of both the government and the common people. The government needs to have a better and stronger administration and policies regarding the proper handling of the waste that is produced due to consumption of resources. People need to be made aware of the consequences of such negligence that can lead to such epidemics. So epidemics can also be categorized as a man-made disaster. I am sure most of us here must have heard about the 9/11 attacks. Yes, the 9/11 attacks is one of the deadliest bombings or attacks on the American soil in the US history. Now, if you have heard about this, then you must be knowing that this was a result of terrorism. Terrorism, in fact, is one of the major reasons of man-made disaster. So, the damages caused due to terrorist attacks on 9/11 in New York, US led to huge loss of life and property. So on September 11, 2001, there were a series of airline hijackings along with several suicide attacks. And this was done by 19 militants. This led to taking away lives of millions of people and left many at the cost of their life. So in this attack, it is believed that around 2,750 people were killed, and the police and fire departments of US were taken by shock because in the course of event, they lost around 400 police officers. So this is in fact one of the most deadliest terrorist attacks that any country would have experienced. War, as we all know, has always been unfortunate and destructive. Now, what do you think could be one of the most important reasons that could lead to the outbreak of any war? Well, it could be attributed to the failure of leadership to resolve conflicts peacefully. Now, due to this lack of leadership, many countries get into wars, and this has a deadly outcome. So we see that one of the major examples of such events is the Syrian-Afghan wars. The Syrian-Afghan wars was a series of wars that took place between Syria and Afghan, and this led to not only the loss of life and property but also huge economic loss that were incurred by the governments of these two countries. So wars too are an important example of any man-made disaster. On 13 June 1997, a fire broke out in the Upahar cinema in Delhi's Green Park area. This happened during the screening of the Bollywood blockbuster Border. It is believed that 59 people died and 100 people were injured. It is one of the most tragic incidents of Delhi. Reports and news articles tell us that the fire that broke out in the Upahar cinema was mainly because of low maintenance of the electrical transformer and human negligence. It is believed that most of the fires that break out in buildings and in residential areas is a result of human negligence and humans being very reluctant about the electrical wiring and the maintenance of all electrical appliances. So the statement here reads that fires are generally a result of human negligence. So there are different factors that are a result of fires that break out in buildings. Most of these factors may include faulty electrical equipment and wiring. It may also include faulty stoves and leakage of cooking gas, and it may also include carelessly thrown matches and cigarettes being a major reason for the breaking out of fire. Now, to avoid fire or to avoid any such major incident because of all these factors, what we need to keep in mind is keep a check on these factors. So with regard to the first point, it says that faulty electrical equipment and wiring may result in fire. What does that mean? It is our duty and responsibility to check whether the electrical equipments are in good condition or not, whether there is no wire frayed, or whether the outlet of electrical appliances are not overloaded. If we keep a track of these, then there will be no fire caused due to faulty electrical equipment and wiring. On the other hand, we have the reason of faulty stoves. So if we do not keep a regular check of the stoves and we do not clean them well, then it may lead to the breaking out of fire. Besides these, we also have the leakage of cooking gas being a major factor behind fires breaking out in residential areas. So what we need to do is we need to be very regular in keeping a track of any sort of leakage from the pipelines and the cylindrical gases. And finally, another important factor that points out towards human negligence is carelessly throwing away matches, cigarettes, and other substances that are inflammable in nature. So substances like these should not be left unattended, and we should be very careful while handling these substances and keep them away from children. So if we keep check of all these factors, then we can definitely avoid a fire situation. So there are various ways in which we could cope with fire. If the fire is small, then we could put it down using water. We could throw water and then extinguish the fire. But if an electrical appliance has got fire, then we cannot use water and instead we use sand to put down the fire. Now, if we get fire on our clothes, then what we do is we immediately roll ourselves on the ground to put down the fire and be safe. Now, other than that, if there is fire in the building, then the fumes and smoke will be very harmful for us and we usually cough. So to avoid fire, we should crawl out of the building and not use any lift, to not take any risk. Now, once all of us are out of the building, we should immediately call for help and call the fire department. The fire department will come for help and will put down the fire immediately. So we just looked at certain ways in which we could cope with fire. But the most important thing is, this is what happens after a fire has broken out. But if we be very careful and if we are not negligent about keeping a track of all the factors that may cause a fire, then we would not reach to such a point where we have to tackle such situations. One of the most devastating and strong forces of nature are wildfires. We all have heard of wildfires, and wildfires in the recent years have become very common, particularly in North America and Australia. So why do you think these wildfires are occurring, and what exactly are wildfires? Well, wildfires are uncontrolled, rapidly spreading and raging huge flames, and these are generally enhanced by the wind action. So wind as an agent becomes very important in spreading these huge wildfires. So they are uncontrolled, rapidly spreading huge flames of fire that spread across wooded areas or forested areas and destroy millions of acres of land. Now, wildfires also have different names. Somewhere they are known as bushfires, somewhere as woodland fires, or somewhere as vegetation fire, depending on the type of vegetation being burnt. Now, as per the US Fire Department, there are around 700 fires that occur annually, and this destroys more than 7 million acres of land. Besides destroying such huge vast areas, it also destroys 26,000 structures approximately each year. This is how devastating wildfires can be. Now, wildfires keep growing and they can spread rapidly. They are as fast as twice the speed as that of a human when he runs. Now, these wildfires can get very devastating as they can burn at very high temperatures. Temperatures that are around 1900 degrees Celsius. And besides burning at such high temperature, they can rise up to a height of 50 meters. So we see that how dangerous these wildfires can get. And we know that wooded areas, most particularly dry tropical grasslands, are most vulnerable to such wildfires or forest fires. They can swipe out millions of acres of vegetation in minutes and not leave anything behind. They can also lead to long-term degradation of environment and cause huge damage to life and property too. Now, though wildfires by the Environment and Protection Agency are regarded as natural disasters, but most of them, that is around 85 to 90% of the wildfires that occur each year, are caused by human activities. So human activities are a major cause of around 85 to 90% of the wildfires that occur annually. So even though they are regarded as natural disasters, but one of the major and the most important reason behind them are human activities. Now, what are these human activities that actually lead to wildfires? Well, we have smoking. So as already mentioned earlier, unattended matches, cigarettes that are thrown away may lead to the breaking out of wildfires. People tend to leave them unattended and do not extinguish the cigarettes properly. That may ignite a wildfire in any forest or wooded area. Besides smoking, we also have burning debris. Now, people tend to burn out the trash of their household or of their work area in the outskirts of their area away from their residentials. Now, these outskirts are usually forested areas or areas where people do not live, and they are mostly wooded. So when they leave behind such burning debris, though these burning debris are left behind with ashes, there are also some slowly burning debris that are not completely extinguished. People tend to leave these burning debris there, which eventually may cause a huge fire and destroy large extensive farms. Now, besides these, we also have unattended campfire. So most of the people, particularly those who love to travel and go for hiking, they tend to set camps at places where they want to rest. Now, these young enthusiasts sometimes become very careless about not taking care of these fires that they lit during their stay at that particular place. So this unattended campfire may also lead to breaking out of wildfires. Besides these, we also have machinery accidents. So sometimes in forested areas where people experiment a lot of things, the explosion of air balloons and car accidents may lead to the breaking out of fire. And finally, fireworks. Now, fireworks are what we usually use to celebrate a good occasion, an occasion that is memorable. But sometimes these fireworks that are explosive in nature may reach a forested area, and there it may cause a huge devastating wildfire. So human activities like these are a major reason for the breaking out of wildfire that occur on an annual basis. Now, wildfires, being natural disaster as per environmental protection agencies, are also caused due to certain natural factors. These natural factors may include global warming, that is rising of temperature across the globe, lightning that usually occur during thunderstorm, and volcanic eruptions. So all these natural factors contribute to 10% to 15% of wildfires. Now, while most of us would not believe that lightning could be a cause for wildfire, it has been proved by various scientists and researchers that lightning is one of the most common triggers of wildfires. Now, when a lightning strikes, it sparks a fire which can ignite the entire forest area and can lead to a huge wildfire. So, lightning definitely is one of the major factors behind wildfires. Besides these, we also have volcanic eruptions. So during volcanic eruptions, the magma tend to rise above the Earth's surface as hot lava. This hot lava tend to reach out to the nearby forest area, leading to a wildfire. And finally, we have global warming, that is a rising temperature due to climate change. And this again is a major cause or a natural factor that may ignite or lead to a wildfire. These wildfires could either be caused due to human activities or natural factors. Human activities mostly includes smoking, fireworks, burning of debris, machinery accidents, and unattended campfires. While on the other hand, while natural factors mostly include lightning, global warming, and volcanic eruptions. So these are the different causes that may lead to a wildfire. So now that we have understood the meaning of wildfires and its various causes, let us take a look at how devastating these wildfires can be. Let us take a look at the different effects of wildfires that is a major concern for people across the globe. So effects of wildfires may include forest degradation. So as we've learnt, these wildfires tend to burn out or destroy millions of acres of land and burn out huge extent of vegetation. So forest degradation is what is one of the major effects of wildfires. They tend to integrate the relationship between the diverse flora and fauna and thus take away the natural diversity or biodiversity of that particular area. It tends to destroy the ecosystem and also snatch away the adaptable land on which millions of species tend to exist. So, besides forest degradation, another effect of wildfires are the loss of ecosystem and biodiversity. Now, besides these, we also have air pollution. Of course, the burning out of fire leads to the release of large amount of greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide in abundance. Now, the release of such large quantities of greenhouse gases and fumes and smoke may lead to the destruction of the air quality and thus lead to air pollution in huge extent. This not only causes problem to the area which has experienced the wildfire, but also the surrounding region or the surrounding population that lives in and around that region. Besides these, we also have soil degradation. So once the vegetation is burnt out, the soil loses out. The soil loses out on the support. We know that trees tend to hold on to the soil together but with the help of their roots. So once the vegetation is ruined, the soil becomes more vulnerable to erosion and other forms of degradation. Besides that, wildfires which burn at such high temperature tend to also burn out the microorganisms that are very important for the microbial activity of the soil, which helps in increasing the fertility of the soil. So the nutritive value of the soil is also destroyed. Besides these, we see a huge impact on humans' well-being. So as I mentioned, air pollution and such vast destruction of vegetation may lead to a huge negative impact on the human beings, and particularly of the firefighters and the lifesavers who are involved directly with the event. Another important factor, and the most important one, is the economic loss. So to put down the fire, the local region or the local government tend to spend millions of dollars. Besides that, there is an army of firefighters and lifesavers and rescue any animal or human trapped in the fire. Besides these, as mentioned earlier, these wildfires tend to hit and destroy properties too. So a large number of properties that get destroyed due to wildfires are also to be compensated. So the government also has to spend a lot of money in compensating and giving shelter to the people who have lost their homes and property during the wildfire. Besides that, we also know the amount Besides that, we also know the number of besides, it goes without saying that there are a number of trucks and logistics involved during the recovery from these wildfires. So all of these together form the different effects, and the most important one of the wildfire being one of the most devastating natural disaster that exists on Earth. So we just looked at how several factors like human negligence, lack of administration by the government, and the incapability of international actors to peacefully resolve conflicts are a major factor that leads to any man-made disaster. So man-made disasters are definitely a result of these factors, and it is on our part as humans and as common public to help the government and ourselves to prevent such man-made disasters and huge economic losses. Therefore, now that we have a good insight of the different types of disasters that we have learned in our previous lessons and in this lesson, let us look at a summary chart where we see all the different types of disasters together. So, we have learned that disaster could be broadly classified as natural disaster and man-made disaster. Right? Now, natural disaster again could be categorized as rapid onset disaster or slow onset disaster, depending on how the disaster has begun or got initiated. Now, the rapid onset disaster are those that do not give time for any preparation. They occur all at once and they come without warning. So, the rapid onset natural disasters mostly include earthquakes, landslides, and volcanic eruptions. On the other hand, we have slow onset disasters. The slow onset disasters usually include cyclones, floods, and droughts. They do not occur at once. They give us some time as they can be slightly predicted. However, they are neither less than the rapid onset disaster because all of these together cause huge damage to life and property. Now let us take a look at man-made disasters. So as we learnt in this lesson, man-made disasters could be nuclear disasters, terrorism, biological and chemical warfare, and finally fires. So these are the man-made disasters that are usually caused due to human negligence, human inefficiency, and lack of leadership. And these again, just like the natural disaster, are neither less devastating. They too cause huge damage to life and property. And unlike the natural disasters, which cannot be avoided or prevented, these man-made disasters could actually, with proper measurement and proper awareness, could be reduced to a large extent. Now, the best way to escape a disaster, or if not escape a disaster, at least mitigate or reduce the impact of a disaster, is preparedness. So proper knowledge, awareness, and preparedness for any disaster is very important to reduce its impact. Now, there are 4 important steps that we need to keep in mind if we want to prepare for any disaster, be it natural or man-made. So the first step that we need to keep in mind is the identification of the risk. So identifying the kind of risk or the probable risk that could take place in any disaster that is to occur is very important. On identification of the risk, we can take measures accordingly. So the identification of risk is the first step to keep in mind or to prepare ourselves for any disaster. Now, once the risks have been identified, the second important step is the development of the plan. So now that we know what could be the probable risk, we need to have or set a proper plan that will help us reduce or mitigate the effects of any disaster. So development of a plan is very important. This requires proper knowledge and expertise so that the resources could be allocated wisely in the places that require help and resources the most. Now, after we have developed a plan, it is time to train the disaster management team. So as I mentioned, just like we need expertise for the development of plan, we also need professionals and trained people to be a part of the disaster management team. So after a disaster has struck, the first thing that comes to our mind is the disaster management team who come as a response to the disaster. So, implementation of the plan and training of efficient ables is very important to be prepared for any disaster. Finally, is to become a leader in your community. So it is very important that after acquainting ourselves with the proper knowledge and the precautionary measures that we could take before a disaster, we need to keep ourselves calm and strong. If we panic, we could worsen the situation. So becoming a leader or acting as a leader in your community, helping others and making them aware of the probable risk and precautionary measures is very important. So these are the 4 steps that will help us prepare strongly for any disaster. In our previous lesson, when we understood the meaning and true nature of a disaster, we did talk about 13th of October. Do you remember what did we say? So 13th of October is the day where we celebrate the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. So if you remember from the last lesson, I mentioned that US General Assembly called for the celebration of the culture of this Disaster Reduction Day. And it is 13th of October that was allotted for the celebration of this culture. Now this was also regarded as an international cooperation for developing countries to reduce their disaster risk and disaster losses. So in this project, many countries from across the globe came together under an international cooperation where the countries were encouraged to reduce the disaster risk and the disaster losses. So in this lesson, we were able to understand the man-made disaster. We looked at the different causes of man-made disaster and saw how man-made disaster could be of various types, each having its own cause and effect. We saw that just like the natural disaster, these man-made disasters are also very devastating to human life and property and also to the environment. We further learned that though most of the natural disasters cannot be predicted and almost all of them cannot be prevented, at least the man-made disasters could be reduced to a huge extent on taking care of our actions and on our perspective towards a better world. So let us work together to at least be very careful with regard to natural disasters and take proper precautionary measures and be very responsible towards reducing man-made disasters as much as possible. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock test. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.